hate this.
You did catch me. We are live on YouTube, okay? Just so you're aware.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not even going to mess with the video. I know I'm good looking. Hey, Mick.
Hello. Can you hear me, Peter?
I can.
Okay.
Maybe I need to go out and open my camera. Share participants more. Okay, that's not working.
Zeb, I just sent you the email. We are live on YouTube.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I hear a cat.
Sorry.
Time is- Let's go. Okay.
Yeah. You want your light off?
Yeah.
Evening, everyone.
Hey, Jordan.
How was your school day, teacher?
It was unique. It actually went better than I expected it to, but it was very different than what we've had experienced in the past, obviously.
Because of the Tuesday, Thursday teams and the Wednesday, Friday, did you see about half of the students you normally would have?
Yeah, normally my classes the last couple of years have been between 20 to 26, 27 my first year. I had a class of 5 kids today.
And then if I'm a Wednesday, Friday student, did I also connect with you somehow today or get an assignment? Maybe it's too early for assignments.
Normally they will, but because we haven't actually sat down with any of them yet, we didn't want to, expect things from them without clarity and clear expectations and everything. So we essentially just said today is more or less a free day.
Yeah, sure.
But they're going to make it up for us, coming back the rest of the week.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back.
We
Yeah.
are live on YouTube, just so you're all aware.
Cool. Is there a thriving group of people watching at the moment?
Is Pete still with us?
I am there. I just can't get my video to work. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. You're the only one that's important, Mick.
I heard that, Pete.
Sorry, you too, Mayor.
My only other reminder of the evening is please make sure your video is on. If you can get it on, that's the only way we can get you to show up on YouTube. So that, which is fine, Peter, we hear you. I just want to make sure those of you that can, it works best if you're talking, if your video is up, then you show up on the screen. So that's all. Thank you.
I apologize, but it said go to settings. I did. I couldn't find anything that says start video. And so.
All right, do we have everybody here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Are we missing somebody? Nope.
Nope, Pete's incognito.
There he is. Yeah, he's a little blue man.
Yeah.
Well, it's 7:30, folks. I'm going to hit post on the Facebook page, and then we'll get started here. Okay, the Bellefontaine City Council is now in session. Please rise for the invocation led by Councilman DeSoma, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Heavenly Father, thank you for our beautiful world and our beautiful city. Guide us as we do the city's business tonight. Please keep us all safe. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
One
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. James.
Here.
Mr. Kurtz.
Here.
Mr. Lau.
Here.
Mr. Reeser.
Here.
Mr. Springs.
Here.
Mrs. Baker.
Here.
Mr. DeSoma.
Here.
Partially.
I have a motion to suspend the reading of the minutes. So moved by Mr. Springs, seconded by Mrs. James.
Mrs. James.
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz.
Yes.
Mr. Lau.
Yes.
Mr. Reeser.
Yes.
Mr. Springs.
Yes.
Mrs. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. DeSoma.
Yes.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move to administrative reports. Mayor's office, Mayor Stoller. You're on mute, sir.
That happens to the best of us. Thank you very much. This evening, we met at 5 p.m. via Zoom with the Planning Commission. All 7 were present. It was a fairly brief meeting. There is an alley that was vacated, so that will move on up to City Council. If you can picture where Hess Lumber is, and then go east by one house, and then there's an alleyway, but it's not an improved alley. It's just a scrubby area between 2 buildings, kind of next to the old Super X and the dollar store, and I guess that's RTC Industries has that building. And so they want to improve it, cut down some of the weeds and shrubs and such. So that was approved, and that'll be coming your direction. I wanted to check with you folks as to how many, maybe show of hands, if you'll be here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. We're planting the bicentennial tree. There's Deb, Zeb, Mick, thank you, Kyle. Teachers not excused, there's another teacher. And Jenna, you did, yep, I have notes. And Josh, thank you. That's great. I have shiny shovels for us to hold. We'll have the president of the Kiwanis Club, the president of the Rotary Club. They can be in the foreground of the picture, and I'll picture that we're in a semicircle behind them. And it's a, wait, Chris Myers told me this, it's a Pacific Brilliance pin oak that the shade tree has selected. And that's what you'll be planting. And there's a nice commemorative plaque that will go in the ground marking this date and time as a bicentennial tree. So thank you for taking a little time. We won't keep you long tomorrow.
Mayor,
Sir?
where are we meeting at?
Oh, I just stay in the front of the building. It should be a beautiful morning, but the tree will probably already be planted, so the shovel of dirt will be more ceremonial than anything. But Chris was working on that. Chris, you wear so many hats, and I'm thankful. He's, of course, our audio visual man to help us go live on YouTube and to share the meeting. But Chris was also had a shovel in his hand today, digging a hole until it got too hard, and then he pulled in some equipment. But thank you, Chris Myers. So we'll see him in the morning to thank him again.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
the shade tree chose that tree because it's hopeful that it will last for 100 years. So that's the plan, and it does not get real big wide, but it'll get pretty tall, probably 50 feet or so. So that was why that was chosen. So as long as we can keep it alive and we don't have any storms or anything, should be good.
Thank you. And it's a handsome tree. They each group paid $200, so it's a $400 tree. And Chris was really impressed with the size that we got for $400. So you'll notice too, I have to look at my screens, but Rick Gildow, there you are. Rick is with us this evening. We also invited him to Finance Committee, and Rick, at the time that the President of Council will recognize Rick. Rick, of course, wears many hats in our community. Of course, was a city councilman for many years. But Rick is part of our Bellefontaine Finance Authority and has been working in the background to assist with the county and the city's port authorities coming together as one, which has taken some legal language and a little back and forth, but it's gone very well. So you're reading that tonight just for the first time. That's item C for first reading. It's not essential that it would speed through, so it's fine for 3 readings. And so I've invited Rick to answer any questions that you might have about the port authorities. And that ends my report, Mr. President, unless there are any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions for the mayor? Seeing none, we'll move to Service Safety Director, Mr. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, members of council. Just have a few items that I'd like to cover tonight. The first one is that we are planning to begin milling the streets that are on the paving program for this fall. That will begin on September 24th. And paving then of the roads that were milled will begin on September 29th. So I wanted to give you all a heads up that that's occurring. The apron project at the Bellefontaine Regional Airport, if you'll recall, you approved some funding through an FAA grant to remove many of the concrete panels on the apron out there that had become degraded. And that project is ongoing right now for replacement. Most of the bad panels have been removed, I believe, and they are preparing the subsurface for pouring of the concrete again, and allowing that to set up and complete the repair. So again, that's ongoing. I'm not sure of a completion date at this time. Wanted to let you all know that I looked up some statistics today from last evening's or overnight storm, I guess. We had a recorded rainfall at our wastewater treatment plant of 4.6 inches of rain. And I believe that's in a 24-hour period. So it may not have entirely been overnight, but that's when we received most of the rain. So out of 16 counties that the Wilmington National Weather Service office reported on, Bellefontaine received the 4th most highest amount of rain out of all of the communities in that 16 county area. So we had a pretty good storm, but all things considered, we came through it relatively unscathed. We didn't have any major flooding issues or major damage. There were some small reports of that occurring, but nothing on any scale that we've seen in the recent past. So I think we came through that pretty well. I wanted to remind the community, I saw this today. This actually isn't a city function, but the Logan County Health District is hosting a pop-up testing clinic tomorrow at the Logan County Fairgrounds for COVID-19. That's going to be from 9 until noon at the fairgrounds. They have asked you to enter from Main Street, but what I would add on top of that is if people can enter from Main Street heading northbound, that would probably encourage a better traffic flow through that area of Main Street if people weren't stopping, waiting to turn left in front of a line of people possibly coming from the other direction. So that is my report, Mr. President. I'll answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Are there any questions for Mr. Henry?
All right. Thank you.
Nope. Okay, just checking. All right. Thank you, Mr. Henry. Law Director, Mr. Stolley. You're on mute, Mr. Stolley.
Good evening, Council. I'd just like to congratulate our city schools and county schools for getting back to school. Mr. Reeser, thank you for all your work. I don't have any official report as the law director, but be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Stolley? Seeing none, thank you for your report, sir. Auditor's Office, Mr. Brentlinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report this evening.
Okay, I don't believe we have any other administration officials to give any reports. So that will conclude our administrative reports. We'll now move to reports of standing committees. Finance Committee, Mrs. Baker.
It unmuted there. Okay, we have several ordinances and a couple of resolutions for this evening. The first one is supplemental appropriations that'll amend the permanent appropriation ordinance for reconstruction improvement and storm sewer construction. It's a total, oh, I didn't write down the total, but the reconstruction improvement piece is an additional $178,400. And the additional storm sewer construction is an additional $165,200. And this is for the widening of East Sandusky out across from the shopping plaza there in front of the new apartments. We're hoping that will be finished before winter here. So we'll be asking for just first reading only on that one this evening. 2058 is also supplemental appropriations, amending the permanent appropriations ordinance. And this is for the general fund auditors wages and salaries line. This is an additional $18. This is to accommodate Angie Peak's payout that happened back in April. And we'll be asking just for first reading only on that one as well this evening. Then 2059 is the joinder of the county, the Logan County Port Authority and the Bellefontaine Finance and Development Authority. This will move one step closer to that. Mr. Gildow, is there anything that you would like to share with the group at this time?
I think the only thing I would let you know is that the Logan County Port Authority has already adopted a resolution in favor of this activity to join the two ports together. The county commissioners have approved their resolution with regard to authorizing the commission to negotiate the Port Authority agreement. And now it's up to City Council to take those next steps. I think it's something that should have happened when we first had the Port Authorities created. It didn't, but we're in a position where we can have that happen. And from an economic development standpoint, the city's fine with its Port Authority, but I think by having the joint authority, it puts us in a better position from an economic development standpoint for the entire county. And whatever benefits a county also benefits the city when you get right down to it. I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Are there any questions for Mr. Gildow? Seeing none, thank you for your report, sir.
Thank you, Rick. We'll be asking for just first reading only on that this evening. And then the next item, 2060, is a resolution. And this goes back to the coronavirus relief funds. As many things with the coronavirus, there's changes all the time. So we've done several different ordinances on this, but this one will establish a new fund and also new revenue and expense accounts. And so then we'll be able to use those funds when they do come in. And these are all things that came through as designated by in the CARES Act. So we'll be asking for adoption for that this evening. Item 2061 is accepting the rates that the Budget Commission puts forward and then authorizes those tax levies and those to be certified then by the county auditor as well. And this is something that we do every year. So this is it's required to be done in September. And then item 2062 is a resolution that estimates the aggregate maximum amount of public funds that can be held on deposit with the city of Bellefontaine. So this basically chooses which financial institution we're going to use. This is done by Ohio Revised Code, says that every 5 years we need to be able to put that out to bids. It has to be a bank or a financial institution that has a location in the city. So it can't be a bank that's just another bank outside of the city. So has to be put in the paper and put out for bids. That's how we moved to PNC 5 years ago to handle our accounts for payroll and all that, which is where most of our money moves through. So we'll be asking for adoption on that one this evening as well. Then we have one ordinance for second reading this evening, and that is for the Bellefontaine Police Department to apply for and accept an Ohio Attorney General law enforcement body armor program grant. The total of that grant is $5,500. The city has to match $1,375 of that, and this is they'll be able to buy 5 vests for that. So this is something that we've done for the last several years. We've been able to get on that, and hopefully that's a grant program that will continue. We'll be asking just for second reading only on that one. That ends my report, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Baker. Any questions for Mrs. Baker? Seeing none, we'll move to Rules Committee. Mr. Kurtz.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Rules Committee met this past Wednesday to discuss some inconsistencies in the ordinances governing swimming pool zoning, and also to discuss some discrepancies between the codified ordinances and the Ohio Revised Code pertaining to moving violations. I would say that the meeting accomplished getting the conversation started. We tossed around some ideas, but came to the conclusion that we need to educate ourselves a little bit more to fully understand the issue and figure out a solution. So we'll be meeting again in the near future. And in the meantime, having conversations with other involved parties to get as much information and guidance as we possibly can to come to a resolution. So that ends my report.
Thank you, Mr. Kurtz. Any questions for Mr. Kurtz? Seeing none, we'll move to Safety Committee. Mr. Lau.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. Utilities Committee, Mr. Springs.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Thank you, Mr. Springs. Streets Committee, Mr. DeSoma.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Thank you, Mr. DeSoma. Sidewalks, Curbs, and Parks Committee, Mr. Reeser.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Joint Recreational District Board of Trustees met on the 1st, last Tuesday, out at Camp Mayura. We got a tour of the grounds at Mayura and what they've already done with taking down the walking path and stairs and it looks like they're going to get that going on the building side of things. We also got a tour of the locations where they're going to set up essentially an open but very natural playground. So not typical playground with slides and swings, but more using nature and things for that. A very interesting project that looks good. We got a report from the superintendent. Fall sports have already started. Football and soccer and cheerleading are up and running. And there's discussions about what is going to be happening next. And then the last thing that came out of the meeting was the park decided to vacate land at Fred Carter Park. I'm not sure if vacate's the right word, but essentially there's 2 acres of land out just off of Lakewood that is not really used as the park, and they're offering to, and they actually approved the selling of that land. So I assume we're going to have a parks meeting coming up soon to discuss that request. And once we have that meeting, we'll bring it back to council. And that ends my report.
Thank you, Mr. Reeser. Any questions for Mr. Reeser's report? Mrs. Baker?
Yes, the playground, is there a specific group that's going to be putting that in, or is that just something through the parks?
I know that the land is being cleared by I forget the name of the group now. I don't know. Mr. Myers, can you help me out here?
It's a Trail Life, which is a different form of like a scouting organization. There's a young man that's going to be working on the clearing, which is just clearing invasive species and leaving the native hardwoods in place. And so it's a nature play area, I think is what you're referring to. And it's a cool play area. It uses imagination and things for kids to play in the woods, but it's a nature preserve. So we want to do it in a contained environment so that we're not impacting our native species too much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Thank you, Jordan. Any other questions? Seeing none, Audit Committee, Mrs. James.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. James. That concludes the report to standing committees. We now move to the portion of our meeting where we accept communications from citizens. Per standing order, we accept communications from citizens in writing up to 6:00 p.m. the Sunday before city council sessions. This Sunday, we received no such communications. Mr. Gildow was here to offer some comment as part of the Bellefontaine Finance Authority. He gave his report during the Finance Committee report. Other than that, there are no other communications from citizens. So that will conclude our communications from citizens portion of our meeting. We'll now move to ordinances and resolutions for first reading.
An ordinance making supplemental appropriations and amending the permanent appropriations ordinance for purposes of reconstruction, improvement, and storm sewer construction and declaring an emergency in the city of Bellefontaine, Ohio.
Mrs. Baker.
Motion to pass on first reading only.
Seconded by Mr. Kurtz.
Mrs. James?
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Mr. Lyle?
Yes.
Mr. Reeser?
Yes.
Mr. Springs?
Yes.
Mrs. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. DeSoma?
Yes.
An ordinance making supplemental appropriations and amending the permanent appropriations ordinance for purposes of general fund auditor and declaring an emergency in the city of Bellefontaine, Ohio.
Mrs. Baker.
Motion to pass on first reading only.
Seconded by Mr. Springs.
Mrs. James?
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Mr. Lyle?
Yes.
Mr. Reeser?
Yes.
Mr. Springs?
Yes.
Mrs. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. DeSoma?
Yes.
An ordinance providing for the joinder of the County of Logan, Ohio to the Bellefontaine Finance and Development Authority and approving a Port Authority agreement with the County of Logan, Ohio in connection therewith and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Baker.
Motion to pass on first reading only.
Seconded by Mr. Kurtz.
Mrs. James?
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Mr. Lyle?
Yes.
Mr. Reeser?
Yes.
Mr. Springs?
Yes.
Mrs. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. DeSoma?
Yes.
A resolution establishing a new fund, establishing new revenue and expense accounts, and making supplemental appropriations for the new expense for the new fund, and declaring an emergency in the city of Bellefontaine, Ohio.
Mrs. Baker,
Motion to adopt.
seconded by Mr. Springs.
Mrs. James,
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz,
Yes.
Mr. Lyle,
Yes.
Mr. Reeser,
Yes.
Mr. Springs,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. DeSoma.
Yes.
A resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor.
Mrs. Baker. Oh, you're muted, ma'am.
Am I open now?
Yeah.
You are now, yes.
Move to adopt.
Seconded by Mr. Kurtz.
Mrs. James,
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz,
Yes.
Mr. Lyle,
Yes.
Mr. Reeser,
Yes.
Mr. Springs,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. DeSoma.
Yes.
A resolution estimating aggregate maximum amounts of public funds to be awarded as deposits of the city of Bellefontaine.
Mrs. Baker,
Move to adopt.
seconded by Mr. Springs.
Mrs. James,
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz,
Yes.
Mr. Lyle,
Yes.
Mr. Reeser,
Yes.
Mr. Springs,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker,
Mrs. Baker, you're on mute.
Yes.
Mr. DeSoma.
Yes.
Well, that concludes our ordinances and resolutions for first reading. We'll now move to ordinances and resolutions for second reading.
An ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director and/or Police Chief to apply for and accept an Ohio Attorney General Law Enforcement Body Armor Program grant and declaring an emergency in the city of Bellefontaine, Ohio.
Mrs. Baker,
Motion to pass on second reading only.
seconded by Mr. Springs.
Mrs. James,
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz,
Yes.
Mr. Lyle,
Yes.
Mr. Reeser,
Yes.
Mr. Springs,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. DeSoma.
Yes.
That concludes our ordinances and resolutions for second reading. There are no ordinances or resolutions for third reading, so that will conclude our legislative agenda for this evening. Are there any communications from the clerk?
None, thank you.
Are there any communications from members of council? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion and a second to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Seconded by Mrs. James. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Need to learn.
Do you need me, Nate?
Nate, I'm getting Ben back on.
All right. Deb, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I just wanted to ask you to get a little bit more information on your resolutions
Okay.
that were adopted this evening.
Okay.
So it would be, what is that, D, E, and F?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Well, yeah, go. What do you need something in particular?
I'm just kind of asking to see what's kind of like the main focus behind each one, just so that way if I can summarize it in the story, I can.
Okay.